with that kind of background set for what the field of HCI and design is based on what we have in our intro classes, this is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the talk. So I'm going to talk about kinds of HCI or UX or design jobs, how to get one out of college, and then a final note about, what about graduate school after college. Okay, so let's start with kinds of HCI UX design jobs. So I made this talk by consulting with people, many of which are UCSD alum, who have recently worked in top design jobs. This is why it's a really fun talk to put together. And as you'll see, hopefully, if y'all enjoy this talk and go on to have a career in this, hopefully you can contribute back to this talk in the future as well. And we keep on improving it over time. So they've worked in, various kind of tech companies, education companies, Qualcomm's right here, just all the kind of typical kind of large companies that have design or user-facing work, right? And people work in these jobs and way more in different sectors as well. There's a bunch of people that are credited here. So all of these insights are theirs, right? Basically, it's just an aggregation of their insights. I've just kind of put it together, right? So, the disclaimer is that, this is just my interpretation of their insights. But, as you can see, this talk was actually very much put together in a very HCI user-centered way, right? So instead of just me sitting here in front of the PowerPoint and just like making up something, I actually went out to talk to people who actually do this stuff for real, and then we collected their insights together and we distilled it into a talk. So it's a very meta thing. So, and again, hopefully in the future I can call on you to add your insights in this to keep it up to date, because one of the themes here, as you'll see, is that this field is so fast changing and fast moving that like every few years things just change, like totally, right? I mean, things just change so fast in the field of user interfaces and technology and design and stuff that talks like these have to constantly be refreshed to keep up to date. They have to just be constantly refreshed. It's a constant challenge, but it also makes it really exciting. Okay, so one slide summary. So if you're going to fall asleep or leave to get breakfast or food, or you want to take a picture, just this is the only slide. If you internalize this slide, you're basically ahead of 99.999% of your peers. So here's one slide summary. If you want to get a job in this field, one, you want to build up a design portfolio. Then you want to lean hard on your personal alumni connections. And then finally, get a design internship while you're still in college. There's a bunch of fine print down here. Again, it's mostly for slides to read on the slides, but the center is the main message. So portfolio, connections, internship. So let's just start with zooming out of what kind of jobs are even available in this field, right? And it turns out that conveniently, the jobs match what you learn in your intro HCI and design courses. So once again, this was the typical HCI and design course, right? Like all the stages that you go through in this design process in your course, and the kinds of questions you're answering in each stage of development. So if you actually look at this, and you think to yourself, I might be interested in this stage up here. This is kind of cool. I like to observe people and talk to people. Or you're like, oh, I really like to code and build apps. Or I really like to do data science and deployment data analysis. Or I really like to do visual design and like make visual mock-ups and stuff. That's cool because there's a job for you, right? So here's some kind of typical types of job titles that allow you to do this. So in the earlier phases, people are often called UX researchers. So UX, again, stands for user experience, or PMs, or product managers, or project managers. UX or product designers usually do this kind of middle phase of prototyping. Visual designers are ones who do, specialize in making the visuals and colors and layouts and everything. In the middle, this kind of interactive prototypes, there's a lot of kind of different kinds of roles called interaction designers and such. UX researchers do a bunch of the testing. Data scientists are now used a lot in industry to do these online experiments, especially at scale. And then finally, to be coding the apps, they're often called just software engineers or product engineers, front-end software developers, web developers, mobile developers. So these are the people who are actually coding at the final product. So there's a huge range of job roles that allow you to kind of focus on one end, on some parts of the spectrum. Okay, so big disclaimer on job titles. So they can be really confusing because different companies called similar jobs with different names. And like I mentioned a few slides ago, these names change really fast. So like all these industry trends just change really fast. So the names and like conventions all just like change all the time. So basically the only reliable way is just to read the job descriptions and ask companies what they're really looking for, right? Like ask them like, what are the real qualifications for this job? What are you really looking for? Because like new buzzwords are going to come up every year, and like, you know, something's going to be called something this year or next year and it means something different. This is from 2013, so this is already fairly old by now, but just gives you an idea of just the confusion of this. You're not supposed to read all the text. There's a lot of text. But again, this is all in the PDF for you to see. But like these are just like hundreds of job roles in real companies that have to do with HCI or UX or design. I mean, I know you can't read many of them because they're small, but look, there's a bunch of UX things, right? There are just so many different kinds of roles. And it's just really confusing because if you're, say, in a research, you know, you're doing a PhD doing research, or you're doing a computer science degree and you're doing a software development role, they're called pretty much, you know, one thing, right? You're a software developer, a software engineer. But like when you're doing design or user experience or HCI, there's just so many different roles that actually mean pretty much the same thing. If you like Venn diagrams, here are some scary ones. Again, you're not supposed to be able to read this. The whole point of me showing this is to show how confusing it is. So, you know, these are just like different names for different kinds of design and like how they overlap with different fields. It's actually kind of interesting if you just stare at this. But basically, let's just show this is really confusing. There are just so many different overlapping circles, and the boundaries are really fuzzy and everything. So I just want to basically give a, you know, overall gestalt idea that this is all very confusing, and it's okay. All right, so here's like my attempt to really simplify all of these Venn diagrams and list into like one slide. So this is ultra simplified, but here we go. So UX researchers are ones who do need finding, user testing, experiments, like really finding out what people are needing. They often have master's or PhD degrees. They often have graduate level degrees because of more of this kind of research methods background. Product managers oftentimes do need finding again, and also do a lot of team coordination, a lot of kind of management of the team and project. UX or interaction or product designers, I describe them as making non-code prototypes. So these are the people who are making prototypes, but they're not coding. So you're not expected to write code. You're expected to use basically graphical tools on the computer. You know, basically if you've used something like Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, you're using tools like that, but more specialized for the design world. Or if you've done like 3D CAD tools and stuff, same idea. This is, I think, the most common type of jobs for new college grads. So most people who want to do a UX or design or HCI job out of undergrad will be trying to go for these UX interaction product designer jobs. This is like the most common one. There's also more emerging kind of newer terms that I haven't heard as much, but people apparently say that these exist. Again, this slide deck was made from real people who are actually working in this. So these terms called architects or prototypers, and there are these kind of hybrid roles where you're doing prototyping, but you're also starting to do some coding, right? So they want people with some kind of computational background to start doing some of the coding. And this hybrid role is can be. I think this has a lot of promise. So, you know, if you can do design and you can do some programming, you don't have to be like the most experienced programmer in the world, but if you can do some of it, I think it really helps. And then there's visual designers, more specialized fields, right? If you're from an art school or art school background, you do that. Data scientists are ones who analyze a lot of the data from these experiments. Often they hire out of PhD nowadays, but increasingly there are data science master's programs, and also here, especially there are undergrad programs, minors and majors springing up. So I think the data science roles will start evolving a lot in the coming years as more degrees are being offered, but they started out being very PhD focused. Then there are front-end developers, right, or just general web developers, software developers, and those are people who actually write the production code. Bunch of fine print here you can read on the slides later.